Okay guys, I've got a crazy story for you thanks to one of my viewers who pointed this out in the comments, because we're talking about that, I don't even want to say landslide, it's a disaster that's happening in Sicily right now in Nescemi. And in the comments of this video, thank you for that, a viewer posted, well, do you have any idea what's going on in the UK? And I'm like, no. So can you imagine, there is also like a cliff collapse, and something has now, they have observed it for a while, been traveling towards the edge of that cliff, and now it has eventually fallen down on the beach. And it's a crazy story. So where do we start? Imagine you're building a reinforced Cold War bunker that is designed to survive a nuclear attack. So this is a very strong, secure building, right? So, and then you have to watch it getting eaten by the sea. This is how we can say it. You wonder, oh, well, that doesn't make sense. Why would they build it? Well, they didn't. They built it like almost like 100 meters or further into inland, but something happened there as well, right? The landslide, the cliff collapse was traveling inland, and this is a crazy story. So the bunker is now down there by the sea. This happened at the Holderness coast in East Yorkshire, and it is not sudden or mysterious. We saw it coming, right? This stretch of coastline is one of the fastest eroding coastlines in whole Europe. It's retreating at an average about 2 meters. That's roughly 6 feet every single year. And just a few years back, that bunker was inland. So when the bunker was built in 1959, it was well over 100 meters away from that. This is kind of crazy. We're talking like over 300 feet away. So at that time, it was considered safely positioned on solid ground, right? If you want a nuclear bunker, you don't want any bomb or anything that's falling to shake this thing and throw it into the water. So coastal erosion here doesn't work slowly and evenly. That's the problem. The cliffs are made largely of glacial clay. And clay, again, is the culprit. We've talked about this at length in Nescemi. And soft sediments as well, in addition to the clay, which means the sea undercuts them from below. And then if we have a lot of rainfall, which we have in this area, it weakens the whole thing from above, and then failure happens. But when the failure happens, it happens suddenly. So over decades, that steady 6 foot per year retreat erased the land between the bunker and the sea. And we have satellite images that show the cliff line marching inland year after year, until the structure, once deep inland, ended up perched right at the edge. And in recent months, we can say the ground beneath it began really to slump, dropping in stages as the cliff faced the collapse below. And local authorities have warned repeatedly that both the cliff top and the beach down there below were dangerous, because the collapse zones on this coast are unpredictable and lethal. So be careful where you do your beach walk. Always look at the cliffs, wondering like, how is this ending up for me, right? So eventually, when geologists would expect the failure to happen, the remaining support really did fail, and the bunker fell onto the beach, and it remained in one piece because it was built solid. And then now the waves starting to wash over it. So one thing we have to be clear about, this was not a nuclear weapons facility. There's some stuff circulating on the internet, and there was no radioactive material inside. This thing was built to shield you from that, right? The bunker's original purpose was to monitor nuclear detonations using instruments to detect blast flashers and radiation, and not to store anything hazardous. So the real danger here is purely geological and physical, right? Rapid coastal retreat, unstable cliffs, sudden landslides, and the falling masonry. So everything we built that we think can protect us seems only to be temporary, right? And what looked safe in 1959 was never long-term, as it seems, right? The sea is always going to win. Just look at the time. But there was interesting stuff going on in that bunker. There's a report from Carl Olsen. He's a former civilian volunteer with the Royal Observer Corps, and he worked in this, how we can call it, a cliff top bunker. And he says collapsing nuclear bunker was my secret workplace. So he remembers now, he says, it was a bleak and secretive existence of that bunker. At the time, it was a lookout in a nuclear era on the East Yorkshire coast. So his job there, he says, entailed monitoring any nuclear blasts in the event of European countries going to war. And he says life in that bunker was dark, cold, and damp. And he shows us a map of that bunker. He said it was basic. There was just a car battery to power a light bulb, no proper heating, and they only had a chemical toilet. But he said, I enjoyed it and I miss it terribly. Well, you could collect that bunker now and transport it away. Maybe you could put it in your garden. I mean, these days in Europe, well, you might have use for a nuclear bunker again, right? But what he says is after they stopped using it, it was gutted. He said, as sad as it is, the erosion there and the eventual collapse was an unstoppable force. And around the UK coastline, this is not the only bunker. There's a number of former nuclear monitoring posts. This is, if we look at historical research, they called it originally the Tunstall ROC Post, believed to be built in 1959. More than 100, they call it yards away from the scene. So Olsen says he volunteered there with a small number of colleagues from 1984 until 1991, when the facility was decommissioned by the Ministry of Defense. And he says, and that's interesting, I'm still sworn to secrecy on lots of things, but at the time it was very strict, and it was case of don't tell your mom, don't tell your girlfriend what you do. So interesting, right? His time, Olsen's time when he volunteered, it followed a rising Cold War tensions between the UK as a member of NATO and the Soviet Union in the early 1980s, right? He said his job involved the use of a variety of technology, including a large pinhole camera and a blast gog and a radiation monitor. Sounds very simple, but you know, it's this is the past, right? It's almost like over 46 years ago. So in the event of a nuclear explosion, he says he would have been tasked with sending data to his commanding officers in the ROC. And he says he was grateful that there were no nuclear explosions at the time. And he says if there had been, you could have been locked in the bunker with enough food and water for 28 days or until such a time when radiation levels were safe. And he said one of the biggest challenges of the job was not telling his family and friends much about it, not even your wife or your girlfriend, right? And he says, people used to try to bribe me with drinks on a Tuesday or Wednesday night down at the pub to get me to tell them about my work. Interestingly enough, they're using volunteers, right? But he said, I didn't. I went home drunk but happy. I didn't say anything. And he says, and that's great. Above all, I just wanted to serve my country. So I hope you like this story, guys. But what's unfolding in Chemi, in Italy, in Sicily, this is an absolute disaster. So check the video in the end screen. And if you're new here, please hype and subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends, and join our great community here. So see you in the next one. Bye-bye.